Army of Thieves was directed by Matthias Schweighöfer. I'm sorry if I've pronounced that name wrong, my apologies. And is the first spin-off and a prequel to Army of the Dead that came out earlier this year, which was directed by Zack Snyder. And this is the first official expansion of that cinematic universe on Netflix. In this movie, we follow Ludwig Dieter's character, who we knew in that film, and we see how he got into that position in the first place. And essentially, you follow him and a group of international thieves who are trying to crack open 3 safes in a span of about 4 days' time before they're moved to a location where they're going to be destroyed. And essentially, obviously, take all the money out of it and live large, all while the zombie apocalypse has started in Las Vegas, Nevada, which, as you know, if you saw Army of the Dead, that's where eventually we're gonna go. I was actually kind of interested in this movie because I really enjoyed Army of the Dead. I thought it was a really fun, silly zombie movie, which knew what it was being for the most part. Yeah, it had some issues, and yes, there were things about it that can be criticized, and I understood if people did not quite like it also, but I don't know. I was kind of expecting dumb zombie movie. I got dumb zombie movie, even if it was a bit overlong. I was excited for this though because Dieter was one of the best characters I thought in that film, and so I was excited to see more of him, and he is definitely much living up to that role even here. He's really good in the movie, Matthias Schweighöfer, and as a director, he does a really good job of directing some really fun sequences. This is a heist movie. The zombie apocalypse part of it is only done in references. You see some stuff on the news, and you get little connections here and there which build into that movie that you're, going to see later on. And that was cool, the way they've sort of established those little things, but it doesn't seem overly reliant on that. This acts more as a character piece. Essentially, you're exploring how this person has lived his entire life and how he eventually got into that spot, but it's also done so in a way that it doesn't kind of feel forced, It actually feels like an organic story. It also adds a little depth to his character. I thought he was a little undercooked in Army of the Dead, which is why this movie really helps, because certain motivations that he has in that film make a lot more sense now. There's one thing in particular that you get to at one point in the movie that connects to something in Army of the Dead that I thought was really, really cool. There is one thing that they bring up in this movie that I was a little questionable about. I thought that was a little head-scratching. But besides that, I really like the way that this film was constructed. And it is a fun heist movie. It's not exactly the most original heist movie you've ever seen. And yes, there are moments where they'll do things that you've seen in a heist movie before. There will be one team member who's like, I'm not sure of this. And then there'll always be that sort of internal conflict that's going on. And yes, that is also in this movie. But the crew members themselves do get established characters just enough for you to understand where each one is coming from, and eventually, as the film progresses, how each character's arc finally goes around, it just about gives you, like I said, enough to latch onto so that you can continue watching the movie and even care about certain things that are about to happen. Even though you kind of know the inevitable outcome for Ludwig, because if you've seen Army of the Dead, you kind of know how that goes. But nonetheless, the film manages to make it compelling enough that, like I said, it actually makes it a little more bittersweet in retrospect. The direction, like I said, is really good. And it's also pretty fast-paced. It's a very quick 2 hours and 9 minutes or so. It slows down a little bit in the middle because, there's a few things that happen, some character drama. But it keeps you, like I said, it keeps you invested pretty much the whole time. Honestly, the first half of the movie was awesome. I was actually having such a ball with it, and I thought that they did some really fun, zany things along with the character choices and the editing choices, and the film often calls itself out on those choices every now and then to the point that I thought was pretty funny. There's one thing in particular where you're trying to figure out a plan of sorts, something that is about to go down, and it's like, okay, but you know how in a movie this thing happens? And then you watch it happen exactly the same way in this, and you're like, well, self-referential joke in the sense that, you're making fun of the fact that movies do this, but then you're also doing it. That can be a pro and a con at the same time. You can be like, hey, you can be self-referential in your humor, but if you're going to then do the exact same thing, is that, what exactly does that say, about your self-awareness? How far does that go? Nonetheless, when I was done watching Army of Thieves, I still had a good time with it. I would say I had about as much fun with it as I did with Army of the Dead. I think they're both solidly entertaining movies in their own regard. They just announced the sequel to Army of the Dead too, so I'm very interested in seeing where that goes. I think with these movies, there is a fun cinematic universe being established that I think is very entertaining. Like I said, if you want to get into the more fundamental aspects of Army of Thieves and some of the, stronger criticisms, you can make them for sure. It is not particularly a strongly told narrative, and there are significant issues like that plague the movie, but much like Army of the Dead, it has a core premise and it delivers on that core premise incredibly well. And I think for that reason alone, the film just worked for me. Again, it might not for everybody in that regard, especially if you didn't like Army of the Dead, there's a chance you might not enjoy this, or maybe you will enjoy this more. I know some friends of mine who actually like this over that. I don't really know, but whenever you guys get a chance to check it out, do so. One final note, this is the third score in a month by Hans Zimmer. We got No Time to Die at the beginning, then we got Dune last week, and we got 3 albums worth of that, and now we've got this movie. This one's with Steve Mazzaro. Good time to be a Hans Zimmer fan, I guess. So yeah, you're gonna get a lot of music from him. I'm not complaining at all. I'm gonna give Army of Thieves a 7.5 out of 10. Guys, thank you very much for watching. I've also been playing the Guardians of the Galaxy game, which I will have a review up for you this weekend. Hopefully that should be done sooner rather than later. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the movies.